I want you to imagine something uncomfortable. Imagine your manager pulls up a spreadsheet that tracks every task you do in a week, every email you send, every update you make, every report you compile, every meeting you attend. Now imagine they ask one simple question for each task. Could a computer do this? How many of your tasks would survive that question? Be honest. Not could a computer theoretically do this if we had perfect AI. Just could a reasonably well-designed system, script, or automation handle this? For most people, the answer is somewhere between 50 and 80%. You are spending the majority of your working hours doing things that a machine could do. You are acting as an expensive, slow, error-prone computer. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. That's not sustainable. It never was. And AI didn't create this problem. It's just making it impossible to ignore. Welcome to Automate Office Work. Today we're talking about the most important career decision you'll make in the next 2 years. Will you automate your own job, or will you wait for someone else to do it for you? Because make no mistake, it's going to happen either way. Let's start by defining something important. The difference between busy and creating value. Most people confuse these two things. They think if they're working hard, if their calendar is full, if they're constantly responding to things, then they must be creating value. But busy is just motion. Value is impact. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine your company has 2 employees. Employee A works 60 hours a week. They're always in meetings. Their inbox is a war zone. They're constantly putting out fires, answering questions, updating spreadsheets, chasing people for information. Everyone knows them. Everyone comes to them. They're exhausted. Employee B works 40 hours a week. They spend most of their time thinking, designing systems, and having strategic conversations. They rarely seem stressed. Their calendar has blocks of unscheduled time. They're not always available. Now here's the question. If you had to cut one of these positions, which would hurt the company more? Your gut might say employee A, because they're doing so much. But the honest answer? Probably employee B, because employee A is doing a lot of tasks, while employee B is creating lasting value. Employee A is acting like a sophisticated machine. Employee B is acting like a human. And this is the uncomfortable truth that AI is exposing. A huge percentage of white-collar work isn't actually human work. It's machine work being performed by humans because, historically, humans were the cheapest available machines. Think about what people do all day in offices. Moving data from one system to another, reformatting documents to match templates, sending reminder emails, collecting information from multiple sources and compiling it, checking if things match across different spreadsheets, following up on requests, updating trackers and dashboards, scheduling meetings, routing approvals through a chain, copying information from emails into forms. These are not human tasks. These are algorithmic tasks. They're if-then logic. They're pattern matching. They're data transfer. They don't require creativity. They don't require judgment. They don't require relationships. They don't require strategic thinking. They require following a process. And computers are really, really good at following processes. But here's what happened. For the last 30 years, it was easier and cheaper to hire a person to do these tasks than to build the systems to automate them. So companies did. They hired people to be human APIs, human routers, human copiers. And those people built careers around these tasks. They got good at them. They became the expert at copying data from the CRM into the reporting spreadsheet. They became known as the person who can format the monthly update perfectly. They became indispensable to a process. But they weren't indispensable because the work was valuable. They were indispensable because the process was broken. And now we've reached a point where the technology has caught up. It's now cheaper and easier to automate these tasks than to keep paying humans to do them. This isn't speculation. This is economics. And economics always wins eventually. Here's where we need to be really clear about what's happening. because the narrative around AI and jobs is mostly wrong. The popular story is AI is going to take everyone's jobs. Robots will replace workers. We're all doomed. That's not quite right. AI isn't going to take jobs. AI is going to expose which jobs were never adding much value in the first place. Let me explain the difference. When you say AI will take a job, you're implying that there was valuable work being done and now a machine will do it instead. That's replacement. But what's actually happening is revelation. AI is revealing that much of what people call work is just unnecessarily manual processes that should have been automated years ago. It's not that your job is valuable and AI will steal it. It's that parts of your job were never particularly valuable, and AI is making that impossible to ignore. Think about it this way. Imagine there's someone whose entire job is to manually copy sales data from the sales system into the finance reporting spreadsheet every Monday. They've been doing this for 5 years. They're really good at it. They catch errors. They know which numbers to check. Then someone builds a simple integration that automatically syncs the data. It takes a developer 3 hours. Did AI take that person's job? Or did technology expose that the job was just a workaround for a system that should have been integrated from the beginning? The job existed because the process was broken. The person wasn't creating value. They were compensating for a system failure. And they probably knew it. That's the worst part. Deep down, most people doing this kind of work know it's not meaningful. They just don't know what else to do. This is what I mean by exposure rather than replacement. And here's why this matters. If you think AI is taking jobs, you'll approach this defensively. You'll try to hide how much of your work could be automated. You'll protect the inefficiencies that make you necessary. You'll hope the automation wave passes you by. But if you understand that AI is exposing low-value work, you'll approach this strategically. You'll proactively identify what could be automated. You'll be the one who builds or advocates for the automation, and you'll position yourself to do the high-value work that remains. Same situation, completely different response. Let me give you a hypothetical example. Imagine someone who spends 15 hours a week compiling reports by pulling data from 5 different systems, reformatting it, and sending it to stakeholders. The defensive approach. Hope nobody notices how much of this could be automated. Keep doing it manually. Emphasize how complex and detailed the work is. Resist any attempts to change the process. The strategic approach. Document the entire process. Identify what data comes from where. Build or request an automated dashboard that pulls and displays this data in real time. Transition stakeholders to the new system. Use the 15 hours saved to work on analysis, recommendations, and strategic planning based on the data. In the defensive scenario, they're waiting to be replaced. In the strategic scenario, they're making themselves more valuable. And here's the brutal reality. The defensive approach only delays the inevitable. Eventually, someone, maybe a new manager, maybe a consultant, maybe someone in IT, will notice that 15 hours a week of manual work makes no sense. And when that happens, the person doing it will be seen as someone who was complicit in the inefficiency, not as someone who is doing valuable work. But the person who proactively automates their own work, they're seen as someone who understands efficiency, who thinks strategically, who can identify and solve problems. They're seen as valuable. Before we go further, I want to acknowledge something. If you're feeling scared right now, that's not irrational. That's not you being weak or pessimistic. The fear is real because the threat is real. There are jobs that consist almost entirely of tasks that will be automated in the next few years. Not might be, will be, because the economics are too compelling to ignore. If your job is primarily data entry and transfer, following standardized processes, routing information between people, compiling reports from existing data, scheduling and coordination, basic analysis that follows templates, compliance checking against known rules, then yes, most of that work is going away. Not because companies are evil, not because they don't value people, but because paying someone $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year to do work that a system can do for essentially free doesn't make sense. And I know the response to this is usually, but there's nuance, but there are exceptions, but humans catch things computers miss. And you know what? Sometimes that's true, but not as often as we'd like to think. Most of the nuance in these jobs is just compensating for bad data or bad processes. Most of the exceptions could be handled with better system design. Most of the things computers miss are things computers miss because we haven't taught them to look yet. The hard truth is that if your primary value is doing routine cognitive tasks quickly and accurately, you're competing with technology that gets exponentially better every year. And that's a race you can't win. So the fear is justified, but, and this is critical, fear should lead to action, not paralysis. Because here's what's also true. Humans are capable of work that computers cannot do. Work that requires creativity, judgment, relationship building, strategic thinking, ethical reasoning, and emotional intelligence. The question is whether you're currently doing that work or whether you're spending most of your time on the algorithmic stuff that computers excel at. And if it's mostly the latter, then you have a choice to make, and you need to make it soon. So you have two paths forward. Let's be very clear about what each one looks like. Path 1, hide and hope. This is the path most people are currently on, even if they won't admit it. You know that parts of your job could be automated. You know that you're doing work that doesn't require human intelligence, but you don't talk about it. You don't volunteer it. You might even actively obscure how simple some of your tasks are. You hope that your company won't invest in automation. You'll retire before it matters. Your specific job is somehow different. The technology won't get good enough. Nobody will notice. You continue doing the work the way you've always done it. You resist process changes. You emphasize complexity when describing your work. You make yourself seem indispensable by being the only one who knows how the broken process works. And in the short term, this might work. You might keep your job for another year, 2 years, maybe 5 if you're lucky. But here's what happens eventually. Someone notices. Could be a new executive who wants to optimize operations. Could be a consultant brought in to improve efficiency. Could be a younger colleague who asks, why are we still doing this manually? And when that happens, you're in the worst possible position because you're not seen as someone who was doing valuable work that got automated. You're seen as someone who was hoarding inefficiency, someone who was complicit in waste, someone who couldn't or wouldn't adapt. And when your job gets eliminated, because it will, you'll be looking for a new role with a resume full of obsolete skills and a reputation for resistance to change. Path 2, automate and evolve. This is the harder path in the short term, but it's the only sustainable path. You proactively identify which parts of your job could be automated. You document processes. You either build the automation yourself or you work with people who can. You advocate for efficiency improvements even when it means eliminating your own tasks. And crucially, you use the time you reclaim to develop skills and do work that can't be automated. Strategic thinking, relationship building, creative problem solving, judgment in ambiguous situations. You position yourself not as someone who performs tasks, but as someone who designs systems, makes strategic decisions, and creates value through uniquely human capabilities. In the short term, this is scary. It means admitting that parts of your job aren't valuable. It means potentially reducing your own perceived necessity. It means learning new things and operating outside your comfort zone. But here's what happens in this scenario. You become the person who understands both the work and how to improve it. You demonstrate strategic thinking and adaptability. You show leadership by being willing to optimize your own role. You develop genuinely valuable skills while your peers are still clinging to obsolete ones. And when changes come, because they will, you're not the person whose job is being eliminated. You're the person who's being promoted to help lead the transformation. Same starting point, radically different outcomes. And here's the thing about these two paths. The choice isn't permanent, but the window is closing. Every month you spend on path 1, you fall further behind. Every month you spend on path 2, you get stronger. The question is, which path are you on right now? Let's talk about why path one, hide and hope, is not actually a viable strategy, even in the short term. There are three reasons. Reason one, the economics are too obvious. Let's do some simple math. Say you make $50,000 a year. Benefits and overhead probably bring your total cost to the company to around $75,000. Now imagine 50% of your work, 20 hours a week, is manual data manipulation, updating trackers, sending standardized communications, and other automatable tasks. That's roughly 40 hours a month, or 500 hours a year of work that could be automated. At your fully loaded hourly rate, that's about $36,000 a year the company is spending on work a computer could do. Now imagine your company has 20 people doing similar work. That's over $700,000 a year being spent on automatable tasks. Eventually, someone in finance or operations is going to notice this. They're paid to notice this. And when they do, no amount of emphasizing the complexity of your work will change the economic reality. Reason two, someone younger will do it. Here's an uncomfortable truth. The people entering the workforce now grew up with automation. They don't think of it as special or scary. They think of it as normal. When a new hire sees you spending hours on a manual process, they don't think, wow, that person is really dedicated. They think, why hasn't anyone automated this yet? And they're not shy about suggesting it, or building it themselves, or going to management with the idea. You can try to protect your inefficiencies, but you can't protect them from someone who doesn't have a vested interest in keeping the work manual. Reason three, the technology is accelerating. This is the big one. 5 years ago, automating complex knowledge work required significant technical expertise and custom development. Today, you can build sophisticated automations with no-code tools, AI assistants, and simple integrations. The barrier to automation is dropping every month. Things that seemed impossible to automate 2 years ago are now trivial. Things that seem impossible today will be trivial in 2 years. You can't hide from exponential improvement. You can only get ahead of it. And here's what people miss. The time to automate your own work is when it still seems hard. Because once it seems easy, you're no longer leading the charge. You're reacting to it. If you wait until there's an off-the-shelf solution that makes your job obviously redundant, you've waited too long. But if you automate when it still requires some effort and initiative, you demonstrate exactly the kind of strategic thinking that makes you valuable. All right, so let's talk about how you actually do this. How do you look at your own work with an automation mindset? This starts with brutal honesty. You need to be able to look at what you do and separate it into three categories. Category one, algorithmic work. Work that follows predictable patterns, if-then logic, data manipulation, following established processes. This is automatable. Category two, judgment work. Work that requires human evaluation, nuance, and decision-making in ambiguous situations. This is harder to automate, but still possible in many cases. Category three, relationship and creative work. Work that requires human connection, strategic thinking, creativity, or ethical reasoning. This is what you want to focus on. Here's an exercise. For week one, log every task you do, not just projects, tasks. Every email you send, every update you make, every piece of analysis you run. At the end of each day, label each task with one of those three categories. Be honest. Don't categorize something as judgment work just because you make a decision. Choosing which template to use for a standard report, that's not judgment. It's pattern matching. Deciding whether to approve a routine expense within policy limits, that's also not judgment. It's rule following. Real judgment looks like evaluating a proposal with incomplete information, deciding between competing priorities with no clear answer, handling a situation that doesn't fit existing processes, making strategic trade-offs, navigating conflicting stakeholder needs. Most people overestimate how much judgment their work actually requires. After a week, review your log. Calculate what percentage of your time falls into each category. If you're spending more than 50% of your time on algorithmic work, you're in the danger zone. The work is going to be automated and soon. You need to act. Now comes the hard part. You need to document your algorithmic work in a way that makes it automatable. This doesn't mean you need to learn to code, though that does help. It means you need to articulate the process clearly enough that someone else, whether a person or a system, could replicate it. Here's how. Step 1. Break it into steps. Take a task you do regularly. Write down every single step. Not, I update the weekly report, but 1. Open the sales dashboard. 2. Filter to last week's date range. 3. Export to CSV. 4. Open to report template. 5. Copy the data from the CSV into the appropriate cells. 6. Calculate the week-over-week change. 7. Format the cells to match the template. 8. Add commentary based on the numbers. 9. Save as PDF. 10. Email to distribution list. Step 2. Identify the logic. For each step, identify what decisions you are making and what rules you're following. How do you filter the date range? Always Monday to Sunday of the previous week. How do you know which cells to copy? Match column headers. How do you calculate the change? Current week minus previous week, divided by previous week. What determines the commentary? If change is over 10%, mention it. If negative, flag for investigation. Step 3. Note the exceptions. What happens when things don't go according to plan? What if data is missing? What if numbers look wrong? What if the distribution list changes? Many people think these exceptions make work unautomatable. Usually, they just make it slightly more complex to automate. Step 4. Estimate the value. How long does this task take you? How often do you do it? What would it be worth to eliminate it? If you spend an hour a week on this task, that's 50 hours a year. If your time is worth $50 an hour to your company, that's $2,500 a year of value in eliminating this one task. Multiply that across all your algorithmic tasks, and you start to see the opportunity. Now, here's the key insight. You don't need to personally build the automation. You just need to understand the process well enough to communicate it to someone who can. That someone might be an AI assistant that can write scripts for you, a colleague with technical skills, someone in your IT department, a contractor or automation specialist, like myself, or a no-code automation tool. Your job is not to become a developer. Your job is to become a process analyst and an automation advocate. Once you've documented your automatable work, you need to find people who can help you actually automate it. And here's good news. You have more options than you think. Option 1, AI assistants. This is the fastest growing option. Tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and others can help you build automations, even if you have zero technical background. Here's a hypothetical example. Imagine someone who manually compiles data from 3 spreadsheets every week into a summary report. They could describe this process to an AI assistant. I have 3 Excel files with sales data. I need to combine them, remove duplicates, calculate totals by region, and create a summary table. Can you write me a Python script that does this? The AI can write the script once. The person runs it. What took an hour now takes 2 minutes. Now notice here that we are not constantly using AI every single time to recreate the process. We are using the AI to create the standard code that can be used then over and over again. We write the code once and then we use it infinite times. Notice we don't need to learn Python. We just need to articulate the process clearly. Now, the first time you try this, it might not work perfectly. You might need to iterate. You might need to clarify. But with each attempt, you get better at describing processes in ways that can be automated. This is a learnable skill, and it's one of the most valuable skills you can develop right now. Option 2, internal resources. Many companies have people who love building automations. They're often underutilized because nobody asks them for help. This might be someone in IT or analytics, a colleague who's known for being techie, a business analyst, someone who's automated their own work. These people often want more interesting projects. Your well-documented process might be exactly the kind of challenge they enjoy. The key is to come to them with the problem clearly defined. Don't say, "Can you make my job easier?" Say, "I spend 5 hours a week doing this specific process. I've documented all the steps. Here's what it does and why. Could we automate this?" Option 3, external resources. If you can't find help internally, external options are more accessible than ever. Freelance platforms where you can hire someone to build an automation for a few $100s. No-code automation tools, Zapier, Make, Microsoft Power Automate, that you can learn yourself. Consultants who specialize in process automation, such as myself. Online courses and communities focused on specific automation tools. The investment is small compared to the time you'll save. Option 4, upskilling yourself. And yes, you can learn to build automations yourself. Not for everything, but for many tasks. Basic Excel formulas and macros can automate a surprising amount of work. Simple Python scripts can handle data manipulation. No-code tools can connect systems and automate workflows. You don't need a computer science degree. You need curiosity and willingness to learn. And here's what people don't realize. Learning to automate one task teaches you how to automate others. The first automation is hard. The 10th, it's much easier. And here's the critical thing. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to be the technical expert. You just have to be the process expert who's willing to work with technical people. The most successful automations I've seen come from collaboration between people who deeply understand the work and people who understand how to build systems. You bring the domain knowledge. They bring the technical implementation. Together, you eliminate the inefficiency. All right, so you've identified your algorithmic work. You're in the process of automating it. Now what? This is the part people often miss. Automation isn't the end goal. Automation is what frees you to do the work that actually matters. So let's talk about what that work is. When you strip away the algorithmic tasks, what's left is work that requires distinctly human capabilities. Capability 1, strategic thinking. This is the ability to see patterns that aren't obvious, to make connections across domains, to think about long-term implications, to identify opportunities and risks that don't fit neat categories. Computers can optimize within defined parameters. Humans can question whether those are the right parameters. What does this look like in practice? Instead of running this weekly sales report, you're analyzing trends and recommending strategy changes. Instead of compiling the status update, you're identifying risks and proposing solutions. Instead of following the project plan, you're designing better project frameworks. Capability 2, judgment in ambiguity. This is making decisions when there's no clear right answer, when you have incomplete information, when competing values are in tension. Computers are great at evaluating options against clear criteria. Humans excel at navigating situations where the criteria themselves are unclear. What does this look like? Deciding whether to pursue an opportunity that doesn't fit your standard evaluation rubric. Determining how to handle a situation that falls between two policies. Balancing short-term efficiency against long-term relationship preservation. Capability 3, relationship building. This is creating trust, reading emotional subtext, navigating interpersonal dynamics, building coalitions, influencing without authority. Computers can facilitate communication. Humans create connection. What does this look like? Actually talking to shareholders to understand their unstated concerns, building relationships that make future collaboration easier, navigating the political landscape of your organization, creating buy-in for change. Capability 4, creative problem solving. This is approaching problems in novel ways, combining existing ideas in new configurations, seeing possibilities that don't exist in current data. Computers can find optimal solutions within known solution spaces. Humans can imagine entirely new solution spaces. What does this look like? Redesigning a process rather than just optimizing it. Finding unconventional solutions to persistent problems. Identifying opportunities that no one else has recognized. Capability 5, ethical reasoning. This is navigating situations with moral complexity, understanding impact on real people, making choices that consider values beyond pure optimization. Computers can follow ethical rules we give them. Humans can grapple with what the right rules should be. What does this look like? Recognizing when efficiency optimizations would harm people in unacceptable ways, making decisions that consider stakeholder well-being beyond just measurable outcomes, advocating for values when they're in tension with metrics. Now, here's the challenging part. These capabilities atrophy when you don't use them. If you spend 40 hours a week doing algorithmic work, you're not developing these skills. You're not building this muscle. And when the algorithmic work disappears, you won't be ready for what remains. This is why you can't wait to start the transition, because the transition isn't just about automating tasks, it's about developing different skills. Let me give you a hypothetical example. Imagine two people who both spend most of their time compiling reports. Person A automates the report compilation and uses the reclaimed time to analyze the data, identify trends, and make strategic recommendations. They start attending strategy meetings. They build relationships with decision makers. They develop a reputation for insights. Person B keeps compiling the reports manually, either because they don't know how to automate or because they're afraid of making themselves unnecessary. Fast forward 2 years, the company finally implements automated reporting. Person A is already operating at a higher level. They're seen as a strategic thinker. The automation doesn't threaten them. It just formalizes what they've already been doing. Person B is now scrambling to figure out what value they provide. They have no track record of strategic thinking because they never had time to develop it. Same starting point. Radically different positions when the inevitable happens. The work that remains after automation is more interesting, more valuable, and more human. But you have to start practicing it before the algorithmic work disappears. Let's talk about timing, because the most common response to everything I've said is, yeah, I should probably do this eventually. No, not eventually, now. Here's why urgency matters. The technology is not waiting. Every month, automation gets easier, cheaper, and more capable. What seems complex to automate today will be trivial next year. The time to automate your own work is when it still demonstrates initiative and strategic thinking. Once it becomes obvious to everyone, you're just catching up. The skills gap grows. Every day you spend doing algorithmic work instead of developing strategic skills, you fall further behind people who are already making that transition. Think about it. If strategic thinking, relationship building, and creative problem solving are what will matter, then every month you delay is a month you're not developing those muscles. The opportunities are limited. As algorithmic work gets automated, the remaining work doesn't expand to fill all the freed up time. There's only so much genuinely strategic work to do. This means there will be fewer roles, and they'll go to people who are already demonstrating those capabilities. If you wait until your algorithmic work is eliminated to start developing strategic skills, you'll be competing with hundreds of other people in the same position, all trying to prove they can do work they've never done before. But if you start now, you can transition while you still have a role. You can build credibility. You can develop a track record. The first movers win. In any organization going through this transition, there will be people who lead it and people who resist it. The leaders become valuable. They're the ones who understand both the old processes and the new possibilities. They're the ones who can design the future state. They're the ones who get promoted. The resistors become obsolete. And here's the thing, you can choose which one you'll be, but the window to choose is finite. Think about it this way. Would you rather be the person who automates your own role and uses the credibility to move into strategic work, or the person whose role gets automated by someone else and has to scramble to prove their value? Would you rather be known as someone who drives efficiency or someone who clings to inefficiency? Would you rather develop strategic skills while you have a stable position, or try to learn them while unemployed? These aren't hypothetical questions. This is the choice you're making every day you delay. I know it's scary. I know it feels like you're making yourself vulnerable, but the most vulnerable position is pretending that the algorithmic work you do will remain valuable indefinitely. It won't. And deep down, you know it. All right, enough philosophy. Let's talk about what you actually do starting Monday. Here's your 4-week action plan. Week 1, the honest audit. Track everything you do for 5 days. Every task, every meeting, every email that takes more than 2 minutes. At the end of each day, categorize each task. Algorithmic, could be automated. Judgment, requires human evaluation. Relationship/creative, requires human connection or creativity. Be brutally honest. Don't inflate the complexity of algorithmic work to make yourself feel better. At the end of the week, calculate your percentages. If more than 50% is algorithmic, you're at risk. Week 2, prioritize your target. From your algorithmic work, pick one process to start with. Choose based on frequency. Do you do this weekly or daily? Time consumption. Does it take hours? Pain level. Is it tedious and error prone? Simplicity. Could you explain it clearly to someone else? Don't try to automate everything at once. Pick one meaningful target. Week 3, document it. Write down every step of this process, every decision point, every exception, every rule. Do this as if you're explaining it to someone who's smart but knows nothing about your specific work. Include what systems or tools you use, what data you access, what decisions you make, and based on what criteria. What the output looks like, what happens when something goes wrong. Test your documentation by having someone else read it and asking if they could theoretically follow it. Week 4, find your automation path. Now that you have a clearly documented process, identify how you'll automate it. Options. Ask an AI assistant to help you build it. Find a technical colleague who might be interested. Look for a no-code tool that handles this kind of workflow. Research if your company already has automation capabilities you don't know about. Post in internal forums asking if anyone has solved this problem. Don't wait for the perfect solution. Start with something imperfect that saves you even 30% of the time. Month 2, implement and iterate. Build the automation. It won't be perfect. That's okay. Use it. Track what works and what doesn't. Fix the problems. Improve it. Even if it's janky, even if it still needs some manual intervention, you're building the muscle of thinking about your work as automatable. Month 3 and beyond, shift your focus. Now that you've reclaimed some time, this is the critical part. Don't let that time get filled with more algorithmic work. Use it for learning a strategic skill relevant to your field. Building relationships with people who work on high-impact projects. Volunteering for projects that require judgment and creativity. Analyzing problems in your organization and proposing solutions. Developing expertise in an area that can't be automated. This is how you shift from being a task doer to being a strategic contributor. And keep automating. Make this a monthly practice. What can I automate this month? Year 1 goal. By the end of 1 year, you should have automated or eliminated at least 50% of your algorithmic work. Develop demonstrable skills in strategic thinking, analysis, or relationship building. A reputation as someone who drives efficiency and thinks about the future. A portfolio of high-impact work that goes beyond tasks execution. This is achievable, but only if you start now. The hardest part of this entire transition isn't the technical side, it's the psychological side. You have to change how you think about yourself and your value. Right now, if you're like most people, your identity is tied to the tasks you perform. You're the person who runs the reports, the person who manages the spreadsheets, the person who coordinates the updates. You have to shift to defining yourself by the value you create, not the tasks you perform. This is scary because tasks are concrete. You did them or you didn't. You can measure them. You can point to them. Value is more ambiguous. Strategic thinking doesn't always produce visible outputs. Relationship building doesn't show up on a task list. Good judgment prevents problems that never happen, which means nobody sees them. But this is the shift you must make. You are not your tasks. You are not the specific processes you execute. You are someone who can understand complex systems, identify improvements, build relationships, think strategically, and create value in ways that are uniquely human. The tasks are temporary. The capabilities are permanent. And here's the thing about this mindset shift. It actually makes work more meaningful. When you're doing algorithmic work, you're essentially a very expensive computer. That's not fulfilling. That's not what human brains are designed for. When you're doing strategic, creative, relational work, you're using capabilities that make you human. That's inherently more engaging. The transition isn't just economically necessary, it's psychologically better. But you have to be willing to let go of the false security of task-based identity. Let's bring this home. Yes, AI and automation are going to fundamentally change work. Yes, many jobs that exist today will not exist in 5 years. Yes, that's scary. But here's what nobody talks about. This is also the greatest opportunity most people will have to redesign their careers. For years, you've probably been stuck doing work that doesn't fully use your capabilities, work that's tedious, work that doesn't require your intelligence or creativity, work that feels meaningless. Now you have permission. Actually, you have necessity to eliminate that work and focus on what actually matters. You get to ask, what kind of work do I actually want to do? What capabilities do I want to develop? What value do I want to create? And then you get to build toward that. Because the old work is going away anyway. This is not a crisis to survive. This is a transition to navigate strategically. You have 2 years, maybe 3, to make this shift. 2 years to automate your algorithmic work. 2 years to develop strategic capabilities. 2 years to position yourself for the work that will remain. That's enough time if you start now. And here's my challenge to you. On Monday, start the audit. Track your work. Be honest about what could be automated. And then automate it. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Don't wait until it becomes obvious to everyone. Lead the change in your own work. Become the person who understands how to make work more efficient, more effective, and more human. Because you can automate your job or someone else will. But only one of those scenarios ends with you in a better position. Choose wisely. Thanks for listening to Automate Office Work. If this episode made you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is a signal. Use it. I'd love to hear from you if you'd like to connect with me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Justin Turman, Turman, or go to my website, automateofficework.com. I've got a great big book a call button, or you can send me an email, justin@automateofficework.com. Until next time, happy automating.